Why did you take our house? A small voice pierced the cold morning air, trembling, broken, yet too young to understand what demolition meant. The man in the tailored coat stopped mid-step. Behind the dust and debris, a little girl stood alone, her cheeks streaked with tears, her tiny arms clutching a dirty stuffed rabbit. What was left of her home lay in ruins behind her, flattened for what would soon become his latest commercial plaza. He only paused for a few seconds, but those seconds would shatter the rhythm of his perfect life. You're watching this at who knows what hour, from who knows where, but something brought you here. Maybe curiosity, maybe fate. Before you scroll, ask yourself, what would you do if your success cost a child everything? If this story grips your heart, subscribe and tell us where you're tuning in from. You won't want to miss what happens next. As the autumn wind howled through the skeletal frames of half-demolished buildings, carrying the bitter tang of dust and decay, Samuel Lockhart emerged from his gleaming black Mercedes, his Italian leather shoes sinking slightly into the churned-up earth. The sight sprawled before him like a battlefield after the cannons had fallen silent. A vast expanse of rubble, where modest homes had once stood, now reduced to jagged piles of brick, twisted rebar, and shattered glass. This was the birthplace of his latest triumph, a sprawling shopping center that would rise like a phoenix, complete with luxury boutiques, multiplex cinemas, and rooftop gardens, injecting millions into the city's veins. Samuel, at 52, had orchestrated it all with the precision of a conductor, leading a symphony of bulldozers and cranes. His tailored suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, hugged his broad frame, a shield against the chaos he commanded. Progress, he always said, demanded sacrifice. And this forsaken neighborhood on the city's edge was just another altar. He adjusted his cufflinks, gold engraved with his initials, as he scanned the horizon. The sun hung low, painting the scene in hues of orange and shadow, while workers in hard hats milled about, their shouts drowned by the growl of machinery. "Mr. Lockhart," called his site manager, jogging over with a clipboard clutched like a lifeline. "We're ahead of schedule. The last structures come down tomorrow. Investors will be thrilled." Samuel nodded curtly, his steel blue eyes flicking over the reports. "Good, no delays. We've got permits expiring in 2 weeks." Efficiency was his religion. Empathy, a luxury he couldn't afford. He had built Lockhart Developments from a single rundown apartment flip into a conglomerate that reshaped skylines. Divorced with a daughter he saw more in photos than in person, his life was a ledger of wins. Balanced by the occasional pang of isolation, he drowned in single malt scotch. As he walked deeper into the site, dodging a forklift hauling debris, a faint anomaly caught his ear. A soft, rhythmic sniffling, like a hidden spring bubbling through cracked stone. He paused, brow furrowing. There, wedged between two toppled walls in a pocket of untouched ruin, sat a child. She couldn't have been more than 7, her small body curled into itself for warmth against the encroaching chill. Her dress, once perhaps a cheerful pink, was now streaked with grime, and her bare knees were scraped raw. In her arms, she cradled a rag doll, its fabric worn thin, one arm dangling by a thread, its painted smile faded to a ghost. Samuel's heart stuttered, a rare glitch in his unflappable demeanor. "Hey, kid," he called, his voice gruff but not unkind, stepping closer. "This isn't a playground. Where's your family? You can't be here." The girl lifted her head slowly, revealing a face smudged with dirt and tears. Her cheeks glowed red from the cold, but it was her eyes that struck him like a physical blow. Large, dough-brown orbs brimming with unshed sorrow, framed by lashes clumped with moisture. They held no malice, only a raw, unfiltered pain that pierced through his defenses. She wiped her nose on the doll's tattered dress and whispered, "You took my house." The accusation hung in the air, simple yet devastating. Samuel glanced around, expecting a parent to emerge from the shadows. But the workers had melted away, sensing the intrusion of something human into their mechanical world. "What do you mean, I took it? This whole block's been cleared. Orders from the city." "But I still have baby Mew," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken, hugging the doll tighter. Because this is the last thing my dad left me. He said she'd keep me safe when he's gone. Her voice cracked on the last word, a tiny fracture that echoed the surrounding devastation. Samuel felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest, like vines creeping over long dormant soil. He had signed the eviction notices himself, batches of them, faceless names on legal forms. Harper, that was one. Maggie Harper and minor dependent. But this was flesh and blood, a living consequence staring back with eyes that demanded accountability. He knelt awkwardly, his suit pants brushing the dirt, bringing himself to her level. Look, sweetie, sometimes things have to change. We're building something amazing here. Jobs, stores, maybe even a toy shop for dolls like yours. She shook her head, curls bouncing defiantly. Mew doesn't need new. She smells like dad. Like home, with pancakes on Sundays and stories at night. A fresh tear escaped, tracing a clean path down her cheek. The words landed like shrapnel. Samuel rose, dusting his hands, his mind reeling. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a 50, crisp, impersonal. Here, get yourself some ice cream or whatever, and go find your mom. This place is coming down. But she didn't take it, her gaze unwavering, those eyes boring into him like silent judges. Defeated, he turned, striding back to his car, the gravel crunching underfoot like accusations. He slid into the leather seat, slamming the door, and revved the engine, peeling away from the sight. In the rearview mirror, the girl grew smaller, a speck amid the wreckage. But her presence loomed larger in his thoughts. The drive home blurred into a haze of traffic lights and honking horns. Samuel's penthouse awaited atop a glass tower he had developed himself. 20,000 square feet of marble and minimalism, with views that stretched to the horizon. Yet tonight, the opulence felt hollow. He poured a drink, the amber liquid swirling in crystal, and sank into his armchair, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. Her voice replayed, "You took my house?" And beneath it, a deeper echo. What had he taken from others? From himself. Dinner with Ava was a battlefield of unspoken words. His daughter, 12 going on 20, sat across the expansive table, her fork toying with gourmet pasta. "School okay?" he ventured, forcing casualness. She looked up, her eyes so like her mother's, cool and distant. "Fine, but Dad, do you remember the doorman's name at your building? The one with the limp?" Samuel hesitated. Frank? "It's Carlos," she corrected, a sigh escaping. "You remember blueprints, not people." The parallel hit him like a wave, merging the rubble girl's plea with Ava's quiet indictment. That night, sleep evaded him. He paced the moonlit living room, the city's hum a mocking soundtrack. Finally, he dialed his assistant. "Dig up the files on the East Side evictions. Focus on Harper, Maggie, and her kid." As the email pinged with attachments, Samuel opened the photo. Lila Harper, age 7. Those eyes again, staring from the screen. What was he building? Towers of isolation, foundations cracked by indifference. For the first time, the empire builder wondered if redemption could rise from ruins. The wind outside whispered promises of change. But Samuel knew storms brewed within. Little Lila's gaze had ignited a spark, one that threatened to consume the man he had become. As the first hints of dawn crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting faint streaks across the polished hardwood, Samuel pushed away from his desk, the laptop's hum fading into silence. Lila's eyes, captured in that grainy eviction photo, refused to release him, blending seamlessly with Ava's accusatory stare from hours earlier. He had thought the files would provide closure, a neat dossier to file away like so many others, but instead they unraveled him further. Maggie Harper, 34, widowed 2 years ago after a construction accident claimed her husband, a laborer on a rival developer's site. No extended family, minimal savings, now adrift in the city's underbelly. And Lila, 7, enrolled in a crumbling public school until the eviction scattered their lives like the debris he had ordered cleared. Samuel's throat tightened, a bitter taste rising as he recalled the dinner table, the clink of silverware amplifying the void between him and his daughter. Ava had barely touched her meal, her fork tracing idle patterns in the sauce. her silence a weapon sharper than any words. He had tried to fill the air with banalities, stock market gains, the upcoming gala, but she had cut through it like glass. Dad, seriously, do you even know Carlos has a grandson starting school this year? Or that he's been saving for a trip back to Mexico? Her voice had been calm, almost pitying, stripping away his defenses layer by layer. He had mumbled something non-committal, feigning interest, but the truth burned. He didn't know. People like Carlos were fixtures, background noise to his symphony of deals. Ava, honey, work's been hectic. The East Side project, yeah, the one where you're building the future. She had air-quoted the phrase he so often parroted in boardrooms, her eyes narrowing. But what about our future? Mom left because you were never here. And now? You're a ghost in your own house. The words had landed like a gut punch, leaving him winded. He remembered reaching across the table, his hand hovering uncertainly, but she had pulled back, standing abruptly. You see contracts, Dad. Not us. Not anyone. The door to her room had shut with a finality that echoed through the penthouse, leaving him alone with cooling plates and a hollow victory. Now, in the dim pre-dawn light, Samuel paced the living room, his bare feet silent on the Persian rug. The question clawed at him. What exactly was he building? Skyscrapers that pierced the clouds, malls that promised endless consumption? But at what price? He thought of his own father, a traveling salesman who had chased commissions across state lines, leaving behind a trail of missed birthdays and empty promises. I'll be home soon, Sammy, the old man would say over crackling phone lines, but soon stretched into weeks, months. Samuel had vowed to be different, to provide the stability his family never had. Yet here he was, mirroring the absence, his empire a gilded cage. He sank onto the couch, head in hands as fragments of the day assaulted him. Lila's huddled form amid the rubble, her doll a talisman against the world he had dismantled. You took my house. Innocent, yet damning. And Ava's cold precision. You don't see people. The two girls, worlds apart in privilege, united in their isolation. Both fatherless in their own ways. Lila's dad gone forever, buried under tons of fallen scaffolding. Ava's right here, yet miles away behind walls of neglect. A low groan escaped him as he glanced at the clock. 4:17 a.m. Sleep was a distant memory, his mind a whirlwind of what-ifs. What if he had paused that day at the site, knelt down and truly listened? What if he had canceled the late meetings, the investor calls to be there for Ava's school plays or bedtime stories? The penthouse, once a symbol of success, now felt cavernous, echoing with regrets. He imagined Maggie's struggle, scraping by on waitressing shifts, shielding Lila from the harsh realities of shelters and uncertainty. How many families had he uprooted over the years? Hundreds? Thousands? Each one a statistic until tonight, when faces attached to the numbers. Rising abruptly, Samuel grabbed his phone, fingers trembling as he scrolled through contacts. His assistant, Elena, picked up on the second ring, her voice groggy but alert, accustomed to his midnight demands. Mr. Lockhart, everything okay? I need more on the Harper file, he said, his tone clipped to mask the desperation. Background checks, current whereabouts if possible, anything beyond the basics. A pause, the sound of typing. The eviction was standard. Notice served, no appeals. Widow and child. Last known address was the site itself. They might be in transitional housing, but it's not logged. I can dig deeper in the morning. City records, social services. Do it now, he insisted, then softened. Please. And Elena. Discretion. Of course, sir. She hung up, leaving him staring at the blank screen. Names, Harper, Maggie, and daughter Lila. So simple, yet they carried the weight of shattered worlds. He pictured Lila's eyes again, not accusing now, but pleading, for warmth, for safety, for the intangible things money couldn't buy. As the sky lightened to a pale gray, Samuel brewed coffee, the aroma filling the sterile kitchen. He watched the steam rise, ephemeral and fleeting, much like the connections he had let slip away. Ava's door remained closed. He didn't dare knock again, fearing more truths he wasn't ready to face. Instead, he sipped the bitter brew, plotting his next move. The East Side project loomed in his calendar, a behemoth demanding attention, but for the first time it felt insignificant. What good was building empires if the foundations were cracked with human cost? By mid-morning, Elena's email arrived. Fragmented leads on Maggie, a temp job at a diner, rumors of a trailer park on the outskirts for displaced families. No photos beyond the eviction shot, but enough to stir action. Samuel leaned back, the question evolving into resolve. He couldn't undo the demolition, but perhaps he could bridge the chasms he had created, starting with two girls who had unwittingly become his mirrors. Yet as he dressed for the day, slipping into another immaculate suit, doubt crept in. Was this guilt a fleeting storm, or the dawn of genuine change? Ava's words lingered like a scar. "You're a ghost," and Lila's silent plea amplified it. He had been absent too long, from his daughter, from humanity. The heartbreaking truth settled heavy. To build anything lasting, he first had to confront the ruins within himself. The city awoke below, oblivious to his turmoil, but Samuel felt the shift, a quiet revolution brewing. Little did he know, the path ahead would demand more than files and favors. It would require his soul laid bare. The engine of Samuel's Mercedes hummed softly as he navigated the potholed roads leading to the outskirts, where the city's gloss gave way to forgotten fringes. The trailer park loomed ahead, a ramshackle cluster of weathered mobile homes huddled against a chain-link fence, their faded paint peeling under the relentless sun. It had been a week since that sleepless night, 7 days of Elena's discreet digging yielding this address, a temporary haven for the displaced, courtesy of overburdened social services. Samuel had rehearsed his approach in the mirror, shedding his CEO armor for a simple button-down and jeans, but the knot in his stomach twisted tighter with each mile. This wasn't a boardroom negotiation. It was a plunge into the unknown, driven by the ghosts of two girls' eyes that had haunted his every waking moment. He parked at the edge, grabbing the bags from the trunk, steaming takeout from a local diner, fresh blankets still in plastic wrapping, and a plush white teddy bear he'd picked up on impulse, its fur soft and pristine. "Hope Hands," he muttered to himself, the fictional charity name rolling off his tongue like a shield. No one could know the truth yet, not until he understood the damage firsthand. As he approached the trailer marked with a crooked 17, the door creaked open, revealing a woman in her mid-30s, her auburn hair tied back in a hasty ponytail, lines of exhaustion etched around her eyes. Maggie Harper. She stood guard like a sentinel, arms crossed over a faded sweatshirt, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "Can I help you?" Her voice was clipped, laced with suspicion, honed by too many broken promises. Samuel forced a warm smile, extending a hand that she ignored. "Hi, I'm Sam, from Hope Hands. We're a volunteer group helping families affected by recent developments in the East Side. Heard you might need a few things." He lifted the bag slightly, the aroma of hot soup and bread wafting out, a deliberate lure. Maggie's eyes narrowed, scanning him from head to toe. "Never heard of Hope Hands. You with the city? Or one of those developers trying to buy silence?" He shook his head, heart pounding. "No, ma'am, just folks who care. No strings. Brought some dinner, blankets. It's getting colder at night. And this for the little one." He pulled out the bear, its beady eyes gleaming innocently. She hesitated, the wariness cracking just enough for necessity to slip through. "Lila's inside, but we're fine. Don't need pity." "It's not pity," Samuel replied softly, his voice steady despite the lie burning on his lips. "It's what neighbors do." The word felt foreign, but he pressed on, stepping forward as she reluctantly swung the door wider. The interior was dim and cramped, a single bulb casting shadows over mismatched furniture, salvaged from who knows where. Lila sat on a threadbare couch, her doll, Mew, propped beside her as she colored on scrap paper with stubby crayons. At the sound of footsteps, she looked up, those brown eyes widening in recognition. "No, just curiosity." Samuel's breath caught. Up close, she seemed even smaller, more fragile, yet resilient in the way only children can be. "Hey there," he said, kneeling to her level, offering the bear. "This guy's looking for a friend. Thought he might keep you company." Lila tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips, the first crack in her solemn facade. She reached out tentatively, fingers brushing the soft fur, but then withdrew, glancing at Mew. "He's pretty, all white and new." Her voice was a whisper, laced with wonder, but she set the bear down gently on the floor. "But I like my old one better because it smells like home, like Dad's cologne and Mom's cookies." The simplicity of it sliced through Samuel like a blade. He nodded, swallowing hard, his head bowing involuntarily as if in penance. "Yeah, I get that. Old things have stories, right? This one's just extra." Maggie watched from the doorway, her arms still crossed, but a flicker of something, gratitude, doubt, crossed her features as she unpacked the food. Steam rose from containers of hearty stew and fresh rolls, filling the trailer with a warmth it had likely lacked for weeks. "Sit if you want," she muttered, portioning out a bowl for Lila. "But don't think this buys anything." Samuel perched on the edge of a rickety chair, the lie settling heavier now. He watched Lila eat slowly, her small spoon dipping with care, while Maggie picked at her own portion, her eyes never fully leaving him. Conversation trickled out, neutral topics, the weather turning crisp, the park nearby with its rusty swings. He learned fragments. Maggie waitressed nights at a greasy spoon, scraping tips to afford basics. Lila missed her old school, where friends knew her dad's funny stories. Each detail was a brick in the wall of his guilt, mortar mixed with the realization that his progress had reduced lives to survival mode. As dusk filtered through the grimy window, Samuel rose to leave, the untouched bear still on the floor. "I'll check back if that's okay. Bring more if needed." Maggie nodded curtly, but her tone softened a fraction. Food was good. Lila doesn't eat much these days. It wasn't thanks, but an acknowledgement, one that fueled the spark within him. Driving back through the gathering twilight, the city lights blurring into streaks, Samuel gripped the wheel tighter. The gentle deception had bought him entry, but Lila's words echoed, "Not everything new brings warmth." His penthouse awaited, a bastion of luxury, yet it felt colder than ever. He thought of Ava, probably buried in homework or her phone, the bear he'd given her years ago gathering dust on a shelf. Presence, not possessions, that was the missing piece. That night, as he lay in the vast emptiness of his bed, the plan solidified. He'd return, build trust under the guise, until the truth could emerge without shattering what little they had left. But doubt whispered, was this redemption or just another layer of self-deception? The trailer park faded in his rear view, but the warmth of that cramped space lingered, a beacon pulling him toward uncharted territory. Little by little, the man of steel was bending, forged anew in the fires of quiet humanity. And as stars pricked the sky, Samuel wondered if warmth could indeed be rebuilt, one gentle lie at a time. The trailer park's gravel crunched under Samuel's tires as he pulled up for the third time that week, the setting sun casting elongated shadows that danced like uneasy specters across the faded units. The bags in his passenger seat had become a ritual. Fresh groceries, school supplies for Lila, even a puzzle set he'd thought might brighten their evenings. Each visit chipped away at the facade of Sam from Hope Hands, revealing glimpses of the man beneath, though the lie still cloaked him like a necessary veil. Maggie's guarded demeanor had thawed marginally. She accepted the offerings with curt nods now, her eyes less like daggers and more like wary shields. Lila, though, was the unguarded heart, her smiles growing brighter, her chatter filling the cramped space with innocent tales of imaginary adventures with Mew. He knocked lightly, the door swinging open to reveal Maggie wiping her hands on a dish towel, the scent of canned soup wafting out. "You again," she said, not unkindly, stepping aside. "Lila's drawing. She's been asking about the nice man with the stories." Samuel's chest tightened at the words, a mix of warmth and guilt swirling like oil in water. He entered, spotting Lila at the tiny table, crayons scattering as she beamed up at him. "Sam, look, I made Mew a new dress, from paper." She held up a colorful scrap, taped haphazardly to the doll. "It's beautiful," he replied, his voice genuine, kneeling to admire it. They spent the next hour in easy rhythm. He helped Lila with a simple puzzle, sharing fabricated tales of Hope Hands volunteers, while Maggie observed from the kitchenette, occasionally interjecting with practical questions about resources. But as the clock ticked, the weight of his deception grew unbearable, pressing against his ribs like an expanding balloon. Each laugh from Lila, each softening glance from Maggie, amplified the fraud. He couldn't sustain it. The crack in his armor demanded truth, no matter the fallout. As Lila busied herself with a new coloring book he'd brought, Samuel turned to Maggie, his face paling. "There's something I need to tell you about why I'm really here." She froze, spoon midway to a pot, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" He drew a deep breath, the air thick with impending storm. "I'm not just a volunteer. My name's Samuel Lockhart. I own Lockhart Developments. I'm the one responsible for the East Side clearance, for displacing you and Lila." The words hung suspended, a fragile bridge collapsing in slow motion. Maggie's face drained of color, then flushed with a fury that ignited like dry tinder. The spoon clattered to the floor. "You!" she hissed, voice low to shield Lila, but trembling with rage. "You come here, play the hero with scraps and toys, and now this? What, to ease your guilty conscience?" Samuel stood, hands raised in surrender. "I didn't plan it like this. I saw Lila at the site that day. Her eyes, they broke something in me. I had to help, but I was afraid." "Afraid?" She advanced, her palm connecting with his cheek in a sharp crack that echoed through the trailer. The sting bloomed hot and immediate, the first physical blow he'd ever received, but it paled against the verbal onslaught. "You think a slap hurts? Try watching your child's world crumble because some suit decided it was progress. We had a home, memories, gone because of you. And now you waltz in with lies? To wash your sins with our leftovers and a few sorry words?" Lila looked up, wide-eyed, clutching Mew. "Mommy!" Maggie whirled, forcing a smile. "It's okay, baby. Grown-up talk. Go color in the bedroom." As Lila scampered off, door clicking shut, Maggie turned back, tears glistening but unshed. "Get out, and don't come back." Samuel touched his reddening cheek, the pain a stark reminder of consequences he'd long evaded. "I deserve that. More. But please know I'm trying to make it right. Not for forgiveness, but because I see now what I've ignored." She pointed to the door, unyielding. "Right? Too late for that. Out." He left without protest, the evening air cool against his flushed skin, the trailer's lights flickering behind him like accusatory eyes. The drive home blurred, his mind replaying the slap. Not just the physical jolt, but the emotional quake. For years he'd navigated boardrooms with unassailable confidence, yet one woman's hand had stripped him bare. He deserved it. Hell, he welcomed it as a wake-up call louder than any alarm. Pulling into the underground garage of his tower, Samuel's thoughts shifted to Ava. The penthouse was silent, lights dimmed, but her door cracked open with a sliver of warm glow. He hesitated, then pushed it gently, finding her curled in bed, asleep under a mound of blankets. In her arms, clutched like a lifeline, was the old teddy bear, faded brown fur, one ear floppy from years of hugs. The gift from her 10th birthday, the last one before his work swallowed him whole. He'd bought it hastily, wrapped it himself, but the memory flooded back, her squeal of delight, the way she'd named it Buddy and promised to keep it forever. He sank onto the edge of the bed, watching her chest rise and fall, her face softened in slumber. So like Lila, both girls orbiting absent fathers, one lost to tragedy, the other to ambition. Ava stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep, and Samuel felt the parallels crush him. Presence. That's what they craved, not the new gadgets he showered on Ava or the anonymous donations he pondered for Maggie. He'd been a shadow in his own home, a name on checks rather than a hand to hold. Rising quietly, he retreated to his study, the city sprawl mocking him from the windows. The slap throbbed, a badge of awakening. He couldn't erase the past, but perhaps he could forge a different future, one where he showed up, not just funded from afar. Maggie's fury was justified, Ava's distance, a mirror of his failings. Both children deserved more than remnants. They needed the warmth of being seen, truly seen. As midnight approached, Samuel drafted an email to Elena. Anonymous aid for the Harpers, rent for a better place, school fees, but no contact. Yet even as he hit send, he knew it wasn't enough. The lie had shattered. Now, truth demanded action beyond charity. He had to rebuild, starting with the ruins of his relationships. The night deepened, stars indifferent overhead. But within Samuel, a quiet resolve took root. The first slap in his life might be the catalyst for 1,000 steps toward redemption. If only he had the courage to take them. The morning sun filtered through the city's haze, casting a muted glow over the community park, where laughter and chatter mingled with the scent of hot cocoa and pine. It was the annual winter gift-giving event, a patchwork of volunteers, local vendors, and families bundled against the chill. Samuel had come under the guise of checking on a Lockhart Developments-sponsored booth, but his eyes scanned the crowd for a familiar small figure, though he knew Maggie would likely keep Lila far from anything tied to his name. The sting of her slap lingered, not just on his cheek, now faded, but in his conscience, a constant reminder of truths he could no longer dodge. Yet today his focus drifted to Ava, who had insisted on volunteering, her rare enthusiasm pulling him here like a lifeline to something he'd almost lost. Ava stood at a table piled with toys and coats, her cheeks flushed from the cold, handing out mittens to kids with a smile Samuel hadn't seen in months. He lingered at a distance, his breath visible in the crisp air, watching her move with a purpose that felt foreign in their sterile penthouse life. She was 12 but carried herself with a quiet maturity, her ponytail bouncing as she laughed with a group of children. For a moment, he saw the little girl who used to climb into his lap for stories, not the stranger who now met his gaze with cool detachment. His chest ached with the weight of missed years, the realization that his absence had carved a canyon between them. Nearby, a burst of giggles drew his attention. Lila stood among a cluster of kids, her worn pink coat a stark contrast to the shiny new jackets around her. She clutched Miu, the doll's tattered form a constant companion, but her face was alight with joy as she chased a foam ball tossed by another child. Samuel's heart lurched. She was here against the odds, a beacon of resilience in a world he'd upended. He stayed back, half hidden by a hot chocolate stand, afraid to disrupt her fleeting happiness. Maggie was nowhere in sight, likely working a shift, entrusting Lila to a neighbor or volunteer. Ava's voice cut through his thoughts. "Hey, you want some fries?" She was speaking to Lila, holding out a paper tray of golden fries dusted with salt, her smile warm and unguarded. Lila hesitated, then nodded, her small hand reaching out. The two girls sat on a nearby bench, sharing the fries and a packet of gummy candies Ava pulled from her pocket. Their chatter was instant, effortless. Lila's animated tales of Miu's adventures blending with Ava's quips about schoolyard antics. Samuel watched, rooted, as the girls bonded over crumbs and laughter, oblivious to the worlds dividing them. "They're just fries, but you'd think it's a feast," a volunteer muttered beside him, chuckling. Samuel nodded absently, his throat tight. Ava's ease with Lila, her genuine warmth, was a mirror to what he'd failed to give her. And Lila, her smile unburdened for now, was a stark contrast to the tear-streaked face in the rubble. He wanted to approach, to say something, but the memory of Maggie's fury held him back. Instead, he watched as Ava taught Lila a silly handclap game, their giggles rising like music over the park's hum. As the event wound down, families drifting away with bags of gifts, Ava and Lila lingered, trading stories under a bare oak tree. Samuel caught snippets, Lila's dream to be an artist, Ava's secret wish to join the school band. He marveled at their connection, two girls from opposite ends of his mistakes finding solace in each other. But when Ava finally spotted him, her face shifted, the warmth cooling to a familiar reserve. She jogged over, Lila trailing behind, Miu swinging in her grip. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Ava's tone was sharp, suspicion creeping in. "Checking on the booth," he lied smoothly, gesturing vaguely. "You're doing great out there, kiddo. Made some friends?" Ava shrugged, glancing at Lila, who waved shyly. "This is Lila. She's cool. She doesn't have a house right now or a dad, but..." She paused, her eyes locking onto Samuel's with an intensity that pinned him. She's happier than me sometimes. At least when she smiles, it's real. The words cut deeper than Maggie's slap, a blade of truth slicing through his defenses. Lila tilted her head, curious but unaware of the undercurrents. Your dad's nice to come watch you, she said to Ava, her voice small but earnest. Mine used to watch me play too. Samuel's smile faltered, guilt surging like a tide. Ava's gaze didn't waver. Yeah, well, my dad's good at watching from far away. He builds cities, Lila, big shiny ones. But keeping people in them? Not so much. Lila frowned, confused. But Ava's words were for him alone, each one a pebble in the growing avalanche of his reckoning. He opened his mouth to respond, but Ava grabbed Lila's hand, pulling her toward the face-painting booth. Come on, let's get glitter stars before they pack up. Their laughter trailed back, leaving Samuel standing alone, the park's festive hum now a mocking chorus. Driving home, Ava silent in the passenger seat, Samuel felt the weight of her accusation settle into his bones. You okay, kiddo? He ventured, glancing at her. She stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. I like Lila. She's got nothing, but she's got something. More than we do in that big empty house. The penthouse greeted them with its usual chill, the marble floors reflecting the city's distant lights. Ava retreated to her room without a word, leaving Samuel to wander the silent expanse. He poured a scotch but left it untouched, the amber liquid catching the glow like trapped fire. Lila's smile, Ava's truth. They swirled in his mind, demanding action beyond secret groceries or veiled apologies. He'd been a spectator in his own life, watching from boardrooms and penthouses, but spectating wasn't enough anymore. That night he sat at his desk, sketching plans, not for skyscrapers, but for something smaller, human. A foundation, perhaps, to support families like Maggie's, to rebuild what his empire had raised. He jotted notes, housing grants, scholarships, legal aid. But as he wrote, Ava's voice echoed, keeping people in them. Money wasn't the answer, presence was. He imagined Lila in a stable home, Ava laughing with him again, not at a distance. The vision was fragile, untested, but it sparked a warmth he hadn't felt in years. As the clock struck midnight, Samuel made a vow, not to investors or boards, but to himself. He'd start with Lila, with Ava, with the faces behind the files. The city slept beyond his windows, but within, a quiet revolution burned brighter, fueled by two girls who had unknowingly become his compass. Redemption wasn't a single act, it was a journey, and he was finally ready to take the first step. The city hummed with the restless pulse of early winter, its streets aglow with holiday lights that failed to warm the hollow ache in Samuel's chest. Weeks had passed since the park, since Ava's piercing words and Lila's unguarded smile had intertwined to form a relentless call to action. The memory of their laughter, so pure and fleeting, drove him now as he sat in his study, surrounded by blueprints not of towers but of hope. The Lockhart Foundation was no longer a fleeting idea, but a tangible plan, its framework sketched out in late-night sessions. Emergency housing grants, job training for displaced families, scholarships for kids like Lila. Yet the ink on those pages felt insufficient, a bandage on a wound he'd inflicted himself. To truly mend, he needed to face the lives he'd upended, starting with the two girls who had become his unlikely mirrors. He leaned back, the leather chair creaking under his weight, and stared at the anonymous letter he'd drafted. A full scholarship for Lila to attend Ava's private school, a place of ivy-covered halls and opportunities far beyond the crumbling classrooms she'd known. The words were careful, unsigned, cloaked in the guise of a charitable donor, for a girl whose resilience lights the way. But as he sealed the envelope, doubt gnawed at him. Would Maggie see it as another hollow gesture, like the groceries and teddy bear? Would Ava, with her uncanny ability to cut through his facades, call it charity to soothe his guilt? He pushed the thoughts aside, addressing the letter to Maggie's trailer, trusting Elena to ensure its discreet delivery. Days later, Samuel found himself at the community center again, not as a distant overseer, but as a volunteer, hauling boxes of donated winter coats. Ava was there, Her enthusiasm for these events a quiet rebellion against their sterile home life. She moved with purpose, sorting gloves and scarves, her laughter mingling with the chatter, mode, deep search of other kids. Samuel watched her from the sidelines, his hands busy but his mind on the scholarship letter, wondering if it had reached Maggie, if it would change anything. He hadn't dared return to the trailer park since the slap, respecting her demand for distance, but the absence of their faces, Lila's hope, Maggie's fire, left a void no boardroom victory could fill. As he stacked boxes, a familiar figure caught his eye. Maggie standing at the edge of the crowd, her coat threadbare but her posture unyielding. Lila was beside her, Mew tucked under her arm, her eyes scanning the piles of gifts with cautious wonder. Samuel's pulse quickened. He hadn't expected them here. Not so soon after the letter. Had she accepted it? Or was she here to confront him again, to tear through his fragile efforts? He busied himself with a crate, avoiding her gaze, but fate had other plans. Ava, oblivious to the undercurrents, spotted Lila and waved her over. "Hey, Lila, come check these out. New crayons, tons of colors." The girls collided in a burst of giggles, diving into a box of art supplies, their heads bent close as they compared shades. Maggie approached slowly, her eyes locking onto Samuel's with a mix of wariness and something softer. Resignation, perhaps, or curiosity. He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans, and met her halfway, the crowd fading into a blur. "You're here," he said, voice low, testing the waters. "So are you," she replied, her tone neutral, but her gaze sharp. "No suit today. No hope hands lies either?" He winced, the barb deserved. "No lies. I'm just helping out. And I meant what I said last time. I want to make things right, even if it's just a start." She studied him, her arms crossed, the scholarship letter's existence an unspoken weight between them. "I got something in the mail," she said finally, her voice steady but laced with challenge. "A scholarship for Lila, full ride to some fancy school. No name on it, but I'm not stupid. It's you, isn't it?" Samuel nodded, his throat tight. "I didn't sign it because I didn't want you to feel obligated. It's for Lila. She deserves a chance, a real one." Maggie's eyes flickered, a storm of emotions brewing, anger, gratitude, pride. "You think throwing money at us fixes what you took? Our home, our stability?" Lila still wakes up crying for her dad, for the walls that held his memory. "I know it doesn't fix it," Samuel said, his voice raw. "I'm not that naive anymore. But it's a step, not for forgiveness. God knows I don't expect that. But because I see her now, I see you, and I'm trying to do better." She looked away, watching Lila and Ava laugh over a shared drawing, their hands smudged with color. "She's happy there," Maggie murmured, almost to herself. "With Ava. They've been talking nonstop since the park." A pause, then quieter. "I haven't said yes to the scholarship yet. I need to know it's not just guilt money." "It's not," he insisted, stepping closer, his sincerity bared. "It's because Lila's eyes made me question everything I've built, and Ava's made me see what I've broken at home. I'm not asking you to trust me. Just give her this chance." Maggie's jaw tightened, but she didn't walk away. "I'll think about it," she said finally, the words a concession, not a victory. She turned to call Lila, who ran over, clutching a new sketch pad. "Say thank you for the supplies, baby." Lila beamed at Samuel. "Thanks, Sam. Ava says you're her dad. That's cool." Her innocence was a balm, softening the edges of the moment. As they left, Maggie's glance lingered, a silent acknowledgement, not of forgiveness, but of effort seen. Samuel watched them go, then turned to Ava, who was packing up, her expression unreadable. "Lila's awesome," she said, zipping her coat. "She deserves better than a trailer. You get that right, Dad?" He nodded, the weight of her approval a fragile thread. "I'm trying, Ava, I promise." Back home, as the city twinkled below, Samuel sat with the foundation's plans, refining them with a clarity born of Maggie's challenge and Ava's hope. The scholarship was a start, but the real work lay ahead, rebuilding trust, presence, humanity. He pictured Lila in a classroom, Ava at his side, not as a bystander, but as a father. The Lockhart Foundation would be his testament, not to wealth, but to repair. As snow dusted the city, Samuel felt the spark of change grow stronger. Maggie's reluctant nod, Ava's tentative trust, they were small victories but enough to fuel his resolve. The journey to redemption was long, but for the first time, he was walking it with eyes wide open. Snow fell gently outside the auditorium, dusting the city in a quiet hush as parents and students streamed in for the school's winter festival. Samuel stood at the back, half hidden by a velvet curtain, his breath catching at the sight of Ava and Lila on stage, their faces painted with glitter stars, hands linked as they rehearsed a duet for the talent show. The past months had been a slow unraveling of his old self, each day a deliberate step toward the man he wanted to become. The Lockhart Foundation had taken root, its first grants quietly dispersed to families like Maggie's, offering stability where his projects had once sown chaos. Lila's scholarship had been accepted, Maggie's reluctant agreement a hard-won bridge. But the distance between Samuel and those he'd hurt remained, a fragile thread stretched taut by pride and pain. Ava had blossomed since Lila joined her school, their friendship a vibrant tether that grounded them both. Samuel watched them now, Ava's confident gestures guiding Lila through a nervous giggle, their voices harmonizing in a song about hope and home. The lyrics, penned by Ava, carried an ache that pierced him. We build our dreams from broken things, find light where shadows fall. He wondered if she'd written it for Lila, for herself, or for the father she was slowly beginning to see again. Maggie sat in the front row, her posture stiff, but her eyes soft, fixed on her daughter's radiant smile. Samuel kept his distance, respecting the unspoken boundary, but his presence here was a silent vow. He was no longer the man who turned away from tears in the rubble. The auditorium buzzed with warmth, families clapping as the girls finished to a swell of applause. Ava whispered something to Lila, who laughed and hugged her, Mew tucked under one arm like a loyal sentinel. Samuel's heart swelled, a mix of pride and longing. He'd spent weeks rebuilding, not just through checks and programs, but in small human ways, helping Ava with homework, listening to her stories about Lila, even attending her band practices where her clarinet squeaked with earnest effort. Each moment was a brick laid in a foundation he hoped would hold. As the show ended, families mingled in the lobby, sipping hot cider and exchanging holiday wishes. Samuel lingered near the exit, watching Ava and Lila weave through the crowd, their chatter a bright thread in the festive hum. Maggie approached them, her coat now a newer one, likely from a foundation grant, though she'd never admit it. When her eyes met Samuel's across the room, time seemed to pause, the air charged with unspoken history. He braced himself, expecting coldness, but her gaze held something new. Wary acknowledgement, perhaps, of the man trying to emerge from the suit. He approached slowly, hands in pockets to seem less imposing. They were amazing up there, he said, nodding toward the stage. Ava's never been that confident before. Lila brings it out of her. Maggie's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. Lila's happy here. The school, Ava, it's given her something to hold on to. I don't know how to feel about you being part of that. Her honesty stung, but it was a cleaner pain than the slap, a sign of dialogue rather than dismissal. I'm not here to buy gratitude, Samuel said, his voice low but firm. I know I can't undo what's done, but I want to live the rest of my life doing right. Not for absolution, but because it's what they deserve. He glanced at the girls now sharing cookies at a table, their laughter a beacon. Maggie followed his gaze, her expression softening. You're not the same man who lied to us in that trailer. I see that. Doesn't mean I forgive you. She paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. But for the first time, I believe you mean what you say. The words landed like a gift. Not forgiveness, but a crack in the wall, a chance to keep building. Samuel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. That's more than I could ask for. She turned away, joining the girls, but the moment lingered, a milestone in his quiet revolution. As the crowd thinned, Ava ran over, her eyes bright. Dad, did you see us? Lila was nervous, but she nailed it. I saw, he said, ruffling her hair, a gesture she didn't pull away from this time. You both were incredible. I'm proud of you. Ava studied him, her gaze searching for sincerity. You're here a lot more now, she said softly. It's nice. The simple affirmation hit harder than any boardroom win. He smiled, the weight of her trust a fragile treasure. I'm trying, kiddo. Gonna keep trying. Back home, the penthouse felt less like a mausoleum, warmed by Ava's chatter about the festival as they sipped hot chocolate. Samuel listened, truly listened, savoring her stories of Lila's art projects and their plans for a spring talent show. Later in his study, he reviewed the foundation's progress. 12 families rehoused, 3 more scholarships funded, a legal aid program taking shape. Each step was a stitch in the fabric of repair, but the real work was here, in the moments with Ava, in the slow trust earned from Maggie. As he gazed at the city, its lights no longer mocking but beckoning, Samuel felt the shift solidify. He wasn't erasing the past, but he was building something new. Not towers of glass, but bridges of presence. Lila's scholarship, Ava's smile, they were proof that broken things could mend, given time and heart. He thought of Maggie's words, belief in his change. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was enough to fuel his resolve. The snow fell thicker now, blanketing the city in quiet possibility. Samuel closed his laptop, the foundation's plan secure, and stepped into the living room where Ava was sketching, her old bear propped beside her. He sat nearby, not speaking, just being there. A father, not a ghost. The journey ahead was long, but each moment of presence was a victory, a testament to the man he was becoming, one day at a time. Snow fell gently outside the auditorium, dusting the city in a quiet hush as parents and students streamed in for the school's winter festival. Samuel stood at the back, half hidden by a velvet curtain, his breath catching at the sight of Ava and Lila on stage, their faces painted with glitter stars, hands linked as they rehearsed a duet for the talent show. The past months had been a slow unraveling of his old self, each day a deliberate step toward the man he wanted to become. The Lockhart Foundation had taken root, its first grants quietly dispersed to families like Maggie's, offering stability where his projects had once sown chaos. Lila's scholarship had been accepted, Maggie's reluctant agreement a hard-won bridge. But the distance between Samuel and those he'd hurt remained, a fragile thread stretched taut by pride and pain. Ava had blossomed since Lila joined her school, their friendship a vibrant tether that grounded them both. Samuel watched them now, Ava's confident gestures guiding Lila through a nervous giggle, their voices harmonizing in a song about hope and home. The lyrics, penned by Ava, carried an ache that pierced him. We build our dreams from broken things, find light where shadows fall. He wondered if she'd written it for Lila, for herself, or for the father she was slowly beginning to see again. Maggie sat in the front row, her posture stiff but her eyes soft, fixed on her daughter's radiant smile. Samuel kept his distance, respecting the unspoken boundary, but his presence here was a silent vow. He was no longer the man who turned away from tears in the rubble. The auditorium buzzed with warmth, families clapping as the girls finished to a swell of applause. Ava whispered something to Lila, who laughed and hugged her, Mew tucked under one arm like a loyal sentinel. Samuel's heart swelled, a mix of pride and longing. He'd spent weeks rebuilding, not just through checks and programs, but in small human ways, helping Ava with homework, listening to her stories about Lila, even attending her band practices, where her clarinet squeaked with earnest effort. Each moment was a brick laid in a foundation he hoped would hold. As the show ended, families mingled in the lobby, sipping hot cider and exchanging holiday wishes. Samuel lingered near the exit, watching Ava and Lila weave through the crowd, their chatter a bright thread in the festive hum. Maggie approached them, her coat now a newer one, likely from a foundation grant, though she'd never admit it. When her eyes met Samuel's across the room, time seemed to pause, the air charged with unspoken history. He braced himself, expecting coldness, but her gaze held something new, wary acknowledgement, perhaps, of the man trying to emerge from the suit. He approached slowly, hands in pockets to seem less imposing. They were amazing up there, he said, nodding toward the stage. Ava's never been that confident before. Lila brings it out of her. Maggie's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. Lila's happy here. The school, Ava. It's given her something to hold on to. I don't know how to feel about you being part of that. Her honesty stung, but it was a cleaner pain than the slap, a sign of dialogue rather than dismissal. I'm not here to buy gratitude, Samuel said, his voice low but firm. I know I can't undo what's done, but I want to live the rest of my life doing right, not for absolution, but because it's what they deserve. He glanced at the girls, now sharing cookies at a table, their laughter a beacon. Maggie followed his gaze, her expression softening. You're not the same man who lied to us in that trailer. I see that. Doesn't mean I forgive you. She paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. But for the first time, I believe you mean what you say. The words landed like a gift. Not forgiveness, but a crack in the wall. A chance to keep building. Samuel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. That's more than I could ask for. She turned away, joining the girls. But the moment lingered, a milestone in his quiet revolution. As the crowd thinned, Ava ran over, her eyes bright. Dad, did you see us? Lila was nervous, but she nailed it. I saw, he said, ruffling her hair, a gesture she didn't pull away from this time. You both were incredible. I'm proud of you. Ava studied him, her gaze searching for sincerity. You're here a lot more now, she said softly. It's nice. The simple affirmation hit harder than any boardroom win. He smiled, the weight of her trust a fragile treasure. I'm trying, kiddo. Gonna keep trying. Back home, the penthouse felt less like a mausoleum, warmed by Ava's chatter about the festival as they sipped hot chocolate. Samuel listened, truly listened, savoring her stories of Lila's art projects and their plans for a spring talent show. Later in his study, he reviewed the foundation's progress. 12 families rehoused, 3 more scholarships funded, a legal aid program taking shape. Each step was a stitch in the fabric of repair, but the real work was here, in the moments with Ava, in the slow trust earned from Maggie. As he gazed at the city, its lights no longer mocking but beckoning, Samuel felt the shift solidify. He wasn't erasing the past, but he was building something new. Not towers of glass, but bridges of presence. Lila's scholarship, Ava's smile. They were proof that broken things could mend, given time and heart. He thought of Maggie's words, belief in his change. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was enough to fuel his resolve. The snow fell thicker now, blanketing the city in quiet possibility. Samuel closed his laptop, the foundation's plan secure, and stepped into the living room where Ava was sketching, her old bear propped beside her. He sat nearby, not speaking, just being there. A father, not a ghost. The journey ahead was long, but each moment of presence was a victory, a testament to the man he was becoming, one day at a time. The city glittered beneath a frost-kissed dawn, its skyline a testament to Samuel's past triumphs, now softened by the quiet revolution reshaping his soul. A year had passed since the school festival, since Maggie's guarded acknowledgement had lit a spark of possibility in his chest. The Lockhart Foundation had grown from a fledgling idea into a lifeline, its reach extending to 12 cities, offering homes, jobs, and hope to families displaced by the kind of projects he once championed without a second thought. He no longer graced the covers of business magazines, his name absent from the lists of power players, but he was a constant presence at resettlement sites, shaking hands with families, listening to their stories, and carrying their gratitude like a weight he was learning to bear. Yet tonight, as he stood in the shadows of the auditorium at Lila's university scholarship ceremony, it was the absence of applause for himself that felt like the truest victory. The room buzzed with pride, parents and students filling the seats, their faces alight with the promise of futures unlocked. Lila, now 8, stood on stage, her dress a vibrant blue that matched the spark in her eyes. Mew tucked discreetly under her arm as she accepted her certificate, a full scholarship to a prestigious university, years away but secured now through the foundation's anonymous donor. Ava stood beside her, a protective shadow, her smile wide as she clapped louder than anyone. Their friendship had deepened into sisterhood, forged in shared laughter and whispered secrets, a bond that had anchored them both through the storms of their young lives. Samuel watched from the back, his heart swelling with a warmth that no boardroom deal had ever kindled. The MC's voice cut through the hum, reading a note from the scholarship's sponsor. "Thank you for teaching a man who thought he was lost how to live again." The words, written by Samuel in a late-night surge of honesty, hung in the air, anonymous yet heavy with meaning. He saw Maggie's head turn slightly, her eyes scanning the crowd, perhaps sensing the truth behind the unsigned letter. She sat in the front row, her posture softer now, her face no longer etched with the sharp lines of survival, but with a quiet strength. The scholarship had been a turning point, not just for Lila, but for her, offering stability that let her breathe, dream, plan beyond the next paycheck. Samuel's mind drifted to the past year, a montage of small, deliberate steps. He'd traded late-night investor calls for evenings with Ava, helping her navigate algebra or cheering at her band recitals, her clarinet now steady and confident. He'd visited resettlement sites, not as a savior, but as a listener, learning names. Carlos, the doorman; Maria, the single mother now training as a nurse; Jamal, the teenager who'd found a mentor through the foundation. Each name was a thread in the tapestry he was weaving, a life no longer reduced to a line in a file. Maggie had remained distant, her trust hard-earned, but she'd allowed the foundation's aid. Rent for a modest apartment, art classes for Lila, small concessions that felt like monumental bridges. As the ceremony ended, families spilled into the lobby, their voices a warm cacophony. Samuel lingered, watching Ava and Lila weave through the crowd, their arms linked, their laughter a melody that drowned out the city's hum. Ava had grown taller, her confidence blooming, while Lila's resilience shone brighter in the safety of a stable home. Maggie approached them, her smile genuine as she hugged Lila, then Ava, a rare gesture that spoke of trust in the girl who'd become her daughter's anchor. Samuel stayed back, his presence unobtrusive, until Ava spotted him and waved him over, her eyes bright with something new, acceptance. "Dad, you came," she said, pulling Lila along. "Lila's going to be a painter or a scientist? She hasn't decided yet. Isn't that cool?" "Very cool," Samuel replied, his voice thick with pride. He looked at Lila, her certificate clutched proudly. "Congratulations, Lila. You've earned this." She beamed, clutching Mew. "Thanks, Sam, Mr. Lockhart. Ava says you're helping lots of people now, like us." The simplicity of her gratitude pierced him, a reminder of the girl in the rubble who'd sparked this journey. Maggie joined them, her gaze steady but not cold. "You're here again," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You don't give up, do you?" "Not anymore," he replied, meeting her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness, Maggie, but I'm trying to live a life that's worth something. To them, to you, to all the families I've hurt." She studied him, the weight of their history hanging between them. "You've changed," she said finally, her voice low but clear. "I don't forgive you, not fully, but I see you trying. That's something." It wasn't absolution, but it was enough, a nod to the man he was becoming, not the one who'd raised her world. Ava tugged his sleeve, pulling him into their circle, and for a moment he was part of their warmth, their laughter, their hope. The city outside gleamed, its towers no longer his legacy, but a backdrop to something far greater. Connection. As they left, Samuel lingered in the auditorium, the empty stage a canvas of possibility. The foundation would grow, its mission spreading to more cities, more lives. But the real work was here, in the quiet moments. Ava's trust, Lila's future, Maggie's reluctant belief. He thought of the note read aloud, its words his silent confession to a girl whose eyes had cracked his world open. He didn't need the spotlight, didn't need his name on plaques. Being here, unseen but present, was enough. Driving home, Ava chattered about Lila's dreams, her own plans to join the art club, and Samuel listened, every word a gift. The penthouse welcomed them with warmth now, not just from the heater, but from the life they were building together. As Ava hugged him goodnight, her old bear tucked under her arm, Samuel felt the final pieces of his old self fall away. He was no longer the empire builder, but a man learning to mend, to be present, to love without conditions. The snow fell outside, blanketing the city in quiet renewal. Samuel stood at the window, the skyline a reminder of what he'd built and what he'd chosen to rebuild. Lila's smile, Ava's trust, Maggie's nod. They were his new foundations, stronger than steel, warmer than any tower's lights. The journey wasn't over, but each day he was learning to live it right, one moment, one heart at a time. In the shadow of a city reshaped by ambition, Samuel Lockhart's journey from a detached empire builder to a man seeking redemption weaves a tale of broken bonds and quiet repair. From Lila's tearful eyes amid the rubble to Ava's piercing truths, two girls became the mirrors that cracked his polished facade, forcing him to confront the cost of his progress. Through the Lockhart Foundation, he began mending lives, offering homes, scholarships, and presence. But the true transformation was internal, built on moments of vulnerability and trust earned through persistent effort. Maggie's reluctant nod and Ava's growing warmth are not grand victories, but small human steps toward a life redefined by connection over conquest. This story isn't just Samuel's. It's a reflection of the choices we all face, between ambition and empathy, absence and presence. Thank you for walking this path with us, for feeling the weight of Samuel's choices and the hope in Lila and Ava's laughter. Your presence here matters. Join us again as we explore more stories that challenge, heal, and inspire. Because every tale, like every life, is a chance to rebuild. Until next time, keep seeing the people behind the plans.